that Rackspace has recently launched, and we will talk about what DevOps means to organizations. To walk us through the presentation, we have two guests here, and I think it's best if I let them introduce themselves.
Cool. I'm Ben Beath. I'm the head of digital for Loud&Clear, which is a joint venture partner in FanHub Media.
And I'm Phil Winter. I'm one of the digital producers at FanHub Media.
And I am your host, Jakub Kajcovic from Rackspace, and I am the Australia and New Zealand DevOps practice area leader for Rackspace. So, as mentioned before, today we'll talk about DevOps in general, what it is, how it came to be, and how organizations can benefit from adopting a DevOps methodology. And we'll also talk to Loud&Clear, who will, as one of our customers, will be sharing the details of the journey that they took with Rackspace. So before we get into the other parts of the presentation, let's talk a little bit about the industry. And if we were to use one word to define the current state of the industry, that word could be disruption. There are new businesses appearing almost monthly, it seems, that are challenging and disrupting the existing business models of established organizations. Airbnb are great examples of one of the largest property rental companies and one of the largest transportation companies in the world, who happen to own absolutely no property and absolutely no cars or taxis or anything else. It's organizations like these that are emerging in the market now, and one thing they all have familiar is the speed and agility at which they are making progress and at which they are introducing changes and updates to their products. And the speed and agility is one of the main themes and requirements that we're seeing in the market now. It's driven by us as consumers as well. We expect change to be immediate. We expect everything to react quickly. We expect new features to be rolled out, and virtually businesses have to follow them all. The traditional waterfall software development process wasn't really designed for this sort of an environment and for these sort of requirements, and it's not very capable of keeping up. Today, it's all about agility. It's about small iterations. It's about moving forward as fast as possible, making small changes, but making them often, instead of having long planning and analysis phases, and then implementing, and then testing, and so on. The requirements now are to deliver features as fast as possible and as often as possible. So this leads us to what exactly is DevOps and how does it fit into this world, and what are the benefits that organizations adopting DevOps can derive. To quote a quote from Matthew Skelton, the author of Operability, a DevOps Cornerstone, DevOps is a highly effective daily collaboration between software developers and IT operations people to produce relevant working systems. Or another quote that we could use is from one of my favorite authors, Gene Kim, the author of the Phoenix Project. He says that the term DevOps typically refers to the emerging professional movement that advocates a collaborative working relationship between development and IT operations, resulting in the fast flow of planned work while simultaneously increasing the reliability, stability, resilience of the production environment. Going back to the previous slide where we spoke about speed and agility, we can see that DevOps is, as a methodology, is perfectly positioned to take organizations on the agile path and give them the speed required to deliver the features that their users are asking for. DevOps is about aligning the goals of the development and operations team and shifting away from For instance, number of features delivered in a sprint for developers and minutes of downtime and experience for operations people, to focusing them on customer outcomes and on the overall success of the application being deployed. DevOps as a methodology is centered around the comms model, and these 5 principles are what drives and defines the DevOps methodology. The C stands for culture, where the objective of adopting a DevOps methodology in an organization is to create an environment which values collaboration between teams, a strong connection with business value, and no fear of change. The automation stems from one of the theories in manufacturing called the theory of constraints, and the idea behind automation is to remove constraints and manual processes from the systems that deliver business value. In the IT world, this is typically seen as enabling a process called continuous delivery. Lean comes from the Toyota Lean Manufacturing Principles, and it talks about making changes to both the IT organization and the application. And the changes lead to developing by making small changes, and often rather than a few large ones. The measurement principle talks about measuring metrics relevant to the application behavior to provide a feedback loop that enables continuous improvement of our application. And last but not least, the sharing principle talks about sharing knowledge and breaking down silos between teams within an organization. And before we continue on to the next slide, we'd like to ask a question of our audience. This is a polling question, so if you wouldn't mind, just click on one of the radio buttons and the polls will be collected. And let's give it about 30 seconds. Okay, thank you very much, and we can move on to the next slide. The organization behind a tool called Puppet Labs, together with another organization heavily involved in doing research around the DevOps culture and methodologies called IT Revolution Press, have started publishing an annual report called The State of DevOps. And in 2014, their study focused around what they refer to as high-performing IT organizations and their counterparts. And they were trying to find out what traits these organizations have in common and what they're seeing as compared to other organizations. And interestingly enough, they found that high-performing IT organizations deploy 30 times frequently and suffer 50% fewer failures, even though the deployment rate has gone up significantly. And the most significant thing they've seen is that the lead times for these organizations are, on average, 8,000 times faster than their counterparts. Now, these are interesting technical stats, but they actually directly correlate to some very, very positive business outcomes for organizations. The high-performing IT organizations are more than 2 times likely to exceed profitability, and they generally experience 50% higher market capitalization growth over 3 years. So continuing on the theme of the benefits of DevOps, some of the benefits are outlined here. We spoke about accelerating lead times or the time to market. We spoke about improving operational efficiency. Some of the other benefits include deployment quality and business focus. And what I would like to do now is pass over to our guests and have them tell us how they've seen these benefits manifest themselves in their organization.
Thanks, Jakub. What we might do is just get Phil, who's obviously one of the lead producers on some of these projects, just to talk about, I guess, the scale of the audiences that we're dealing with, and then we'll talk about how DevOps has really helped us serve up great properties to those customers.
So just to give you a bit of background, FanHub Media, we're a digital sporting agency. So we create highly interactive applications that are very data intensive, and we have some of our clients are the AFL, the NRL, official A-League games. So I guess the key for us is that we've got huge audiences. Up on any given weekend, we can have up to 500,000 people using our application. So I guess DevOps becomes crucial for us to make sure that we're managing that traffic appropriately. I guess a couple of our biggest products, just to give you a bit of background, are our fantasy sporting products. So that's what we do for the AFL and NRL. We provide a fantasy sport platform, so that's a mobile application as well as a website. And yeah, we really experience huge surge traffic as a weekend approaches and as our team announcements are made.
So for us, the speed component of what DevOps brings us is really the benefits there are not so much that we're doing a lot of high frequency deployments, but it's when we do need to make a deployment, it needs to be on Rails, because typically we can't take the site offline at all. We don't have the capabilities to shut down for a 4-hour maintenance window. So for us, DevOps is about how quickly can we deploy with a high degree of confidence, rather than we're not rolling out 3 to 4 code updates a day like a Facebook would, for example. But when we do deploy, it needs to be fast. What we found with operational efficiency is that using infrastructure as code, which is really, I guess, what DevOps is primarily about, the benefits we see there is that I can roll back in my application source code 3, 4, 5 years and see the technical decisions that people made. I can see the technical difficulties that our development team encountered. I can see the why, what, and how, and then also the when of what's happened at an application code level. Historically, we've struggled because we haven't had that same sort of visibility at an infrastructure level. And that means people making the same mistakes. It means people forgetting, 12 months on what was done 12 months ago. What we can do now with infrastructure as code through DevOps is we've got all those decisions sitting in the code repository, and that's really powerful for us. It means that when we deploy, we're deploying a lot smarter and also a lot more consistently.
So Ben, would you say that by adopting some of the DevOps methodologies, the operational side has actually gotten closer to the business outcomes?
Yeah. The divisions of ops and dev and sort of compartmentalization of those two departments, it's definitely something that DevOps has helped us overcome. We've got, for example, the engineers who are working with it at Rackspace in the DevOps capacity on Slack, talking directly with our senior developers, and those chats are happening at all times of the day. And all the decisions that are made go straight into the code repository. So the idea of sort of ops having the keys and devs championing the bit is very much a thing of the past for us.
Excellent.
One other thing just around automating procedures. One really nice thing we've been able to do is automate essentially how our applications roll out. So using configuration files to determine using configuration files to determine a lot of how we roll out automation.
All right, excellent. So I believe we will talk about that a little bit more. There's been some interesting things that we've been able to come up with together. So right now, we're going to move on in the presentation, and to tie it back to what we were saying in the beginning. We've been talking about what DevOps is, what the culture is, and what are some of the principles, and how organizations can actually benefit from using DevOps methodologies. but we've also mentioned that this webinar will be around the Rackspace DevOps Automation service that was introduced recently to the market in Australia. So before we start talking about the service, what I would like to cover off is reflect a little bit on why Rackspace and why DevOps and why Rackspace is doing DevOps. And Ben, I think I'll refer to you again. When we last spoke, you had one really interesting comment that you shared with me when we were talking about Rackspace and DevOps. And you actually said you were missing a slide about that, so we went off and tried to make one to explain very well why Rackspace is doing DevOps. So could you share that with us for now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we found as a company is that we're great at building products, and for us, it's about trying to partner with organizations who are really good at what they do and allow us to focus on what we do. Rackspace has been living DevOps now for a few years. They've developed a range of methodologies that are really robust and a degree of, I guess, transparency where they're able to share it with organizations like us. For us, the transparency and communication that's come through from Rackspace has probably been the thing that's allowed me to feel confident in outsourcing the operations capability and confident that it's being handled by people who are going to do a better job of it than us. That can be a hard thing for devs to take, finding people who are better at doing things than you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's as Ben mentioned, the operations and the service has always been kind of in the blood of Rackspace ever since the beginning. The company comes from a pedigree of managed hosting and managed operations, and to us, DevOps has been a simple evolution of fanatical support. It's been the way we've been able to, I guess, take our service to the next level and start providing organizations of today with the agility that they require to meet their demands. The next part of the presentation will talk about the internal story that Rackspace underwent in its own DevOps journey. So some of you may know that Rackspace got together with NASA in 2010 to build OpenStack. Rackspace contributed the Swift part, and NASA contributed the Nova part, which is the server orchestration part. 2 years later, in 2012, Rackspace relaunched its entire public cloud, and this time it built it on OpenStack. And ever since the launch of the OpenStack cloud, we've internally seen an incredible surge of making products and delivering features and functionality to our customers. So some interesting statistics to look at for 2013 were that we were able to launch 18 products in 18 months, push code to production 2,500 times, and the way we've been able to do this is by applying DevOps principles and tools as the foundation for the product teams that were working on this product. The DevOps Automation service that we talk about now is simply a surfacing of the existing methodologies and tool chains and experience that Rackspace has developed internally in building its own public cloud. So as an interesting statistic, the code base that the entire public cloud runs is the trunk of OpenStack, and it's about 4 weeks behind because of some of the additional testing that we have to do. But just the incredible tooling and methods that go into this are staggering. So where does DevOps fit at Rackspace? Rackspace is the managed cloud company. Managed cloud and managed operations is what we do. And to us, the DevOps Automation service is a service method. It's a way of delivering service to our customers, and it's a way of providing the fanatical support that we are known for. We still maintain a service level that we refer to as SysOps, which is focused around a more traditional ITIL-centric IT service management operations model. But the organizations today are telling us that they need agility, they need speed, they need to be able to run faster than their clients. And if we are to serve as service providers to them, we need to be able to run faster than them. An interesting anecdote that one of the old school rackers has shared with me once was that many years ago, it was fast enough and good enough to be able to rack up a server in 2 weeks. And that was seen as providing a high level of service back in the early 2000s, simply because every other organization took 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks to deliver that. But at these days, customers are expecting an entire environment to be stood up in minutes or hours, not days, and definitely not weeks. So let's talk about some of the key pillars of the DevOps automation service. And Ben, I think I'd like to pull you in as well into this conversation. So we've talked about the infrastructure as code previously. So the way we deliver this service is that we essentially run our customers' infrastructure as a software project. So we can automate workflows and respond faster to their business needs. How has this been beneficial for you guys?
It's really in the auto scaling side of things that we've probably seen the most benefits, and some of the really sophisticated rules we've been able to build up that respond not just at a basic, we're getting a lot of traffic level, but starting to look at the nuances of the application and really segmenting the way the infrastructure our application lives on. The old model that we used to have was just adding sort of instances as things got bigger, and now we're starting to scale out components of our site and doing that all largely through code.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've already mentioned source control in the past and how you like the operational visibility that it provides you by having all of the versions of the infrastructure saved in version control, much like a software project, and being able to refer back to them.
Yeah, and that's critical for a business like us that essentially follows the sun. It needs to be online all the time and has distributed teams working on it all over the world. We need to have that full visibility, and it can't just be someone going in and making a change on production on the fly. So even when we do identify bugs, those are done in source and pushed up just as you would with a code fix.
Exactly.
It's interesting that we haven't made any hot fixes to production with someone just going in and hacking a file of production for years now. When you talk to people, they're like, that's something of the past. But people still make infrastructure tweaks on the fly.
It's pretty scary, isn't it?
Which is terrifying. You get, so that idea of source control, it doesn't slow down your fix at all. It just makes it more predictable.
More predictable, exactly. And what about application monitoring? I know when we spoke last, you were a huge fan of the metrics that you guys are being able to get from tools like New Relic.
Yeah, look, absolutely. When we have our big application launches, we get New Relic up on the big screen. Everyone in our team is well versed on what the key metrics in the New Relic mean. And there's not a lot we can do with New Relic because everything now is automated. And as soon as RPM starts spiking, for example, or as soon as there's AppDex sort of error below a certain threshold or above a certain threshold, then new instances spun up or whatever the case may be.
And from a resource perspective, previously we spent so much resource at monitoring our sites and applications. Sort of automated processes really allowed us to take a step back from that and focus on what we do really well, and that's build product.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Phil. So to tie it all up, the key pillars that the DevOps automation service delivers to customers is infrastructure as code, where the infrastructure is ran as a software project. Everything is in source control, so the customer has full visibility into everything that's happening, into all of the decisions that have been put in place, and what the code looks like at any stage. To tie that in, application monitoring is provided by default through New Relic, and these stats and metrics are surfaced to the customers and are consulted with Rackspace DevOps engineers. And last but not least is a concept of environment stacks. So there are supported stacks that Rackspace has decided to put together, which are based on over 15 years of experience and best practices within the company. These stacks revolve around the most popular web frameworks. So let's take a look at them now and let's discuss how they look. So the stacks and technologies involved in delivering this service could be seen in 3 different layers. The first layer above is essentially the scaffolding. It's the control plane of how the service is delivered. We talk about infrastructure automation and infrastructure as code. So in the Linux world, that is delivered using chef. In the Windows world, that is delivered using the Windows PowerShell desired state config. The performance and monitoring is done through a series of tools, notably New Relic, Rackspace Cloud Monitoring, and then a combination of StatsD and Graphite. Log aggregation is possible through Logstash, which combined with Elasticsearch and Kibana give customers an amazing overview of their environment, and source control is done through GitHub. The stacks we discussed are focused around the most popular web frameworks of today. You have I think as of now, all of these are open source, even .NET as of a couple of months ago. So we have Rails for Ruby developers, Java, Python, Node.js, .NET, and PHP. And then there are additional technologies that customers can decide to plug in and use to give more features to their application. The technologies are database technologies such as Postgre or MongoDB, search technologies like Elasticsearch, clustered file systems such as Gluster, or queuing systems like RabbitMQ. And altogether, a combination of these forms a stack that a customer can deploy and run their environment on. So as we get closer to the end of our webinar, let's spend some time discussing what a customer journey looks like. The Loud&Clear have obviously been with this journey have been on this journey with us, and it's been incredibly fun for both companies. So Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about, or maybe even Phil, you as well, how the journey with Rackspace looked like for you. We started with the initial interest and solution design, and all the way through all of the other phases.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started, I guess, approaching Rackspace with a desire just to lift and shift from our current infrastructure. It soon became pretty clear, as we started to chat with the Rackspace engineers, that there's a lot more juice we could get out of the orange than just lifting and shifting. And so we started working through what components of our solution had either single points of failure or weren't scalable. A big part of what Rackspace has helped us with as well is the whole, I guess, migrating our application to the cloud journey, which is probably separate to this, but was definitely a useful part of the process. Part of that solution design, there was definitely some assumptions that we'd made in terms of our code that the Rackspace engineers, I guess, helped us work through. We were scaling at that point in time very, I guess, quite bluntly. You'd almost say, like, there wasn't a lot of finesse to how we were scaling. And working with some of the engineers at Rackspace, that they sort of broke our application more into components and said, well, let's scale these. You don't have to be scaling on 30 to 64 gigabyte instances every time. We can just scale this component on 8 gigabyte instances. One of the things that really surprised me is that the engineers aren't always pushing you for the biggest either. There's cost optimization built into this process, which is
absolutely,
which is useful to know. Then, in terms of building, we follow the ChatOps approach. So we've got a distributed development team between Australia and Ukraine. Rackspace's engineers, I guess, Sydney, UK, USA.
Sydney, UK, and US, yeah. We also have a follow the sun model around the world in our locations. Yeah,
so I think we definitely use chat far more than we used voice conference, and the chat seemed to work really well. The Slack channel that Rackspace set up for us had all the continuous integration, sort of API integration as well. So we were getting notified of builds. If someone pushed a fix, that would come up in the chat as well. It meant that between sort of our team of 4 developers, the Rackspace engineering team spread around the world, everyone knew what was going on. And we also would run our meetings through that. As far as implementation, that was probably the biggest cultural shift that we had to make. We got very used to doing our own deployments, especially around infrastructure, and putting that in someone else's hands.
It must have been difficult looking at it.
Yeah, it's culturally, it's a challenge because not only are you automating everything, but you're also effectively outsourcing deployment.
It's that aspect of people kind of letting go of the fear and the trust. I expect there must have been a lot of trust for that to be able to happen.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And look, now that we're through that, and now that that's, I guess, standard operating procedures, it makes perfect sense. And the quality of engineers that we're getting access to, and the level of automation that we've got in place means that it's not really as though we've got a human anymore pushing this deployment out. It's all in the code. Everyone's comfortable with what's in the code, and someone pulls the trigger, and then it happens.
It's a very high level of transparency.
It is, absolutely. Look, in terms of handover, everything's sitting there in the code. So between our developers and the Rackspace engineers, there's a lot of familiarity to the point where the FanHub team and the Rackspace team are playing our fantasy games, together.
So who's winning right now?
FanHub is winning. Yeah. And so that's, it's been a good journey from that point of view. I think the thing I touched on previously is we're getting access with this DevOps piece that we're doing in Rackspace to the engineers who have worked on massive sporting projects before for some of the world's biggest sports. And they're not learning this stuff from scratch. And devs love to do things from scratch. That's one of the things that almost defines a dev from an ops person. So we're definitely benefiting from that experience.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And how's the support experience been after the handover? Has the service lived up to its expectations?
So far, so good. Yeah, absolutely. I think part of that's keeping the lines of the transparency there with tools like Slack, which are just mean that you can pick up a conversation even after 2 weeks. You can have a sort of transparent conversation. And it's also in the code as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ben mentioned Slack a few times, and I think the word chat-ups was used. So I thought we'd bring a little bit more visibility into what that is for the members in the audience who may not know. So Slack is an online chat tool that can be accessed through a web interface or through a native application or through a phone application. And Slack is very unique in that the chat function is possibly the least interesting part of it. The most interesting part is all the automated integrations that can be tied into Slack. And as Ben mentioned before, it's possible to tie in messages from GitHub, commit notes, pull requests, or messages from New Relic or any other monitoring system directly into the chat channel. And a history of all of the events that transpire, kept indefinitely for as long as Slack will be around, and can be archived. It's fully searchable and provides the entire thread and train of thought that has occurred before or during any event, and it provides a very high level of visibility into any operations that are going on. And this is the way that Rackspace has started communicating with customers. When they onboard during the DevOps automation phase, and then further support is all done through Slack channels and through other methods as well, such as traditional phone and tickets. But
the nice thing about Rackspace is you can always jump on the phone if there's anything important. So it's not like we're getting a diminished level of support. It's more that we're, I guess, augmenting that fanatical support that we've been getting from Rackspace within this level of
channel.
Yeah, highly granular, constant 24-hour chat channel that's fantastic. And one last thing about supporting and maintaining is if anyone sort of listening to this remembers what development was like before SVN and code repositories and the world of pain that you found yourself in, and then how easy that makes it now. Well, that's what DevOps Automation has done for us at an infrastructure and ops level as well.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what you did beforehand or how that ever worked.
I don't even know, to be honest.
Yeah. Hypercore versioning was awesome.
Okay. So to tie it all up, the Loud&Clear story was an extremely adventurous and amazing story for us. It was so much fun to be able to work on this project, and we wanted to share with you some things that we've identified together with Ben as being very interesting that happens throughout the build process. And I think, Ben, you mentioned specifically the two things that we have here. So Memcache and some architectural requirements around Memcache.
Yeah, definitely. Look, we did performance testing, which was facilitated through Rackspace and occurred, sort of throughout the runway leading up to our major launch. And the Rackspace engineers, I guess, really weren't comfortable with how we'd implemented Memcache and saw it as being that single point of failure that if anything was going to let us down the application, that was it. I was really impressed with how that was handled. I guess devs can sometimes be a bit reluctant to hear feedback that the code they've implemented is not maybe the best, but it was presented in a way of sort of identifying not just that Memcache was a point of failure, but also here's a way that we can work through this. So that was great. The second example there is probably the one that most excited me, because once our dev team started to get really culturally comfortable with automation, they started to want to push the envelope a bit, and they've got access to engineers who can help them with it, to the point where, and I touched on this earlier, we've now got effectively a self-configuring environment. We've got one configuration file that sits in the application environment, and then it will deploy the rest of the application based on what's in that configuration file. That was a process that previously took about 4 to 6 hours. Really, it was highly manual, and there was a lot of room for things to go wrong. All you needed was someone to forget, to reference the right sport, for example, and you've got a huge impact. And so that now is all happening from the configuration file and takes literally minutes. And when you start talking about applications that build themselves, applications that deploy themselves, that's really exciting. That to me sounds like we're talking about something that 3 to 4 years from now everyone will be doing, and we're right at the forefront of that.
That's amazing. So to give everybody a little bit more insight into what Ben was talking about, Simon, one of the engineers on the Rackspace end, and I believe it was Victor, one of the engineers on Ben's end,
yes,
got together and discussed how they could eliminate this 4 to 6 hour manual process of setting up the application after it's been deployed, to understand the correct environment into which it's been deployed, how it needs to behave, what IP addresses it needs to reference for its database, and all of that.
So for example, we've got a pre-prod environment. We have to make some configuration changes from pre-prod because we don't want emails coming out of pre-production.
Right, of course.
Or things like that. So these little subtle nuances that can be quite a detailed, I guess, workflow.
I guess they make a huge difference to the experience that people have from the application and how it needs to behave.
Yeah, exactly. And we do things like, for example, we'll roll the game on staging and pre-prod through different states. So we'll simulate a live round happening. We'll simulate live data coming through. And if that was to happen on production due to a human or manual error, we still could talk about the impact of that.
I guess what you find, especially when you're working with sport, is you're working with a very passionate audience, to say the least. So, and especially when you're working with games, there's prize money involved, and people have their own sort of private wagering on different results. I guess the impact of getting one small thing wrong, one tiny error, can really have a massive ripple effect. And once you lose the confidence of one user, it can, through social media and blogs and forums, can ripple along and have a huge impact on your product. So the ability to be able to get it right, I'd like to say every single time, almost every single time, has really made a difference for us.
Yeah. As much as possible, this configuration approach helps us eliminate human error. And when you're looking at deployments happening, late at night, early in the morning, when people are tired or people are stayed up late, anything you can do to automate that is a huge win.
Absolutely. Okay, and right, and I think there was one more. Yes, we have the project management. So this was part of the deployment was also load testing for the application, and just to tie it up because I'm a little bit touched on time. The load test was orchestrated between, I believe it was South Africa, Ukraine, Sydney, and Melbourne, and I'm not sure if we had the UK on at some stage as well, and the US.
Yep.
Okay, the more the merrier. And I believe all of this was done through Slack.
All done through Slack.
All done through Slack. Shared, orchestrated, and communicated. Very powerful tool.
Yeah, with results feeding straight into Slack as they happen. So that was pretty powerful.
Amazing. Okay, so very, very inspiring story there. And to tie off the presentation, there's one last slide that we'd like to share with you who are dialed into this webinar. So this slide is an attempt at giving a visual representation of how the workflow and how the engagement between a customer and Rackspace would look in the DevOps automation service point of view. So as you can see, there's the Rackspace DevOps engineering team that is working on creating environments through either Chef or DSC. These environments are saved into GitHub, and statistics and analytics are fed back through the environment monitoring and data analytics. And they interface directly with the customer's team, whether it's a small operations team, and they interface with the customer's development team, or whether it's directly with the development team, as it was in the case of Loud&Clear. And together, through this collaborative method, we're able to get the best customer outcomes possible. And before we tie up with the last question, is there anything that Phil or Ben, you guys would like to say towards the end?
I guess the thing I'd like to get across from a product point of view is just the ability, this sort of stability and this infrastructure has allowed us to really focus on the product, and any minor issue that there's been this season has been probably a product team mistake rather than the infrastructure issue that we've had to then go chase our tail and figure out what's gone wrong, and then that one issue has led to a million other issues, and we're sort of chasing our tail. So yeah, that confidence and that trust in the infrastructure has really allowed us to focus on what we need to focus on.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we have one last question that we'd like to ask of our audience before we close off the webinar and before we get to the questions that have been placed by the audience. So let's give it about 30 seconds, and then we can answer any Q&A that we had. Okay, thank you, everyone. And let's go and address the questions that we've had asked in the beginning. So I think the first question we had is, would be more interested in detail on what integration was achieved between StatsD, Graphite, and Rackspace Cloud Monitoring, please. So in this specific case, StatsD and Graphite weren't used. So Rackspace Cloud Monitoring was deployed together with New Relic. The integration between StatsD and Graphite is mostly just StatsD and Graphite, and all of the information that the feeds can then be visualized using Graphite. Yeah, that would be the answer. The second question we had is, do you provide cPanel by any chance? cPanel is a management tool, and it's not really it's not really a part of this automation service. So if customers wishing to run cPanel are free to leverage the managed infrastructure service from Rackspace and install cPanel, but it wouldn't be provided in the scope of the service, no. And another question we have is, do you provide New Relic app monitoring services integrated or only provide integration? So I'm not entirely sure if I know what that means, but I'll try and answer the New Relic question. So the way it works is any customer that signs up for the DevOps Automation service gets a New Relic account under the Rackspace umbrella, which is completely free of charge to them. And all of the application monitoring and performance feedback that is posted into the New Relic account is then analyzed by Rackspace engineers and the account team and discussed with the customer during periodic account reviews. Alternatively, there's a few clients that already have their own New Relic account, and in that case, Rackspace would need access to that New Relic account such that they can plug in all of the customer's infrastructure into that account.
One thing I'd say about New Relic as well is that we thought we were using New Relic pretty well, and then when we started working with Rackspace as engineers, they really, I guess, unlocked a lot of New Relic for us, and I feel like we're getting a lot more out of it now, having gone through the DevOps experience.
Oh, great. So the value, the feedback that's been provided by the engineers has been helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to New Relic.
Yeah, there is. And I think we have one more question here. So will DevOps be supporting Scala at some time in the future? The answer is we are constantly looking at what technologies our customers are demanding of us. So we currently support Java-based languages throughout our Java stack, mostly focused around application servers like Tomcat and Jetty. And whether Scala will be on the menu will be simply determined by customer demand. The more customers coming to us using Scala, I can't see a reason why it wouldn't happen. Okay. So unless we have any more questions, I think we're running out of time. And so what I would like to do is thank our esteemed guests, both Phil and Ben. And I would like to thank you to everyone who took the time out of their day to listen to the webinar and attend. And I'm sure Rackspace will be in touch with the recording, and I think the presentation will also be made available. Okay. Thank you, and have a great day.
Bye, guys.